Mr. President, thank you so much for granting us this interview in behalf of ARD German television.
You're most welcome, Sir.
Yesterday we were filming at the Umayyad Mosque and we had some interviews with people on the ceasefire, and there was one guy selling shawarma and he said, maybe this is a historical day. So my question, Mr. President, is, would you agree that this was a historical day, and are we at a special time of Syrian history?
Let's say I hope, more than being agreed, because we agreed on the cessation of hostility as we announced last week. But let's say it's a glimmer of hope now for the Syrians, for all of us. But usually when you have ceasefire or cessation of hostility or such agreement, which is bilateral, it's going to be difficult to keep and save. How would it be when you talk about multilaterals? And when I say multilateral, we talk about more than 100 faction of terrorists, and so many other countries supported them. Or let's say if you talk about two camps with contradicting goals regarding that cessation or that agreement. So let's say we hope, and we are going to do our job to make it work, but it's not enough to have the goodwill.
What are you doing, you and the Syrian government, to make it stable, this ceasefire?
Actually, it started less than 48 hours, as you've been here for the last few days. And as I think you know that the terrorists, we know that the terrorists breached that agreement since the very first hour. As a Syrian army, we refrained ourselves from retaliating in order to give the chance for that agreement to survive. That's what we can do. But at the end, everything has a limit, depends on the other side.
Why did it take so long to get an agreement?
It didn't take so long to get agreement. It took so long for the other countries who supervised the terrorists to work for it, mainly the Americans. They started talking about it only a few months ago. For us, from the very beginning, we started this process on a local basis, not comprehensive basis, something we called local reconciliation, where you have this cessation of hostility, where you give the militants amnesty, offer them amnesty, in order to either join the Syrian army or to go back to their normal civil life. So we started this process before for the last reason, and it succeeded in many areas. But this one is different, as when you talk about more comprehensive. It's not fully comprehensive, but more comprehensive agreement.
3 days ago we were in Daraya. We saw heavy bombardments on the other side. And I think this is one of the problems of Syria, that who is the one to decide if you're fighting terrorists like ISIS or al-Nusra, or is it rebels? I think the only one you can define is you. So I guess the peace is in your hands, isn't it?
What do you mean peace in my hand?
Your decision is to strike or not to strike, and you define who are they.
You are right. When you have such agreement, you have to ask yourself about two things. What the maps, the military map, let's call it, that you're going to work upon, and what are the criteria, or let's say the mechanism of monitoring that ceasefire. Till that moment, it's been, as I said, more than 24 hours since we started the cessation of operations. So far, we don't have maps. So let's say that agreement is not mature yet. When it's mature, you can take responsibility as one of the responsible sides on the survival of this agreement.
Mm-hmm. Imagine, Mr. President, I would be a rebel, not a terrorist of ISIS or al-Nusra, but a rebel, Free Syrian Army. What should I do that you will accept me as a Syrian civilian again?
Just to give up your armament. Whether you want to join the political process or you're not interested about the political process, you don't have any political agenda or vice versa, doesn't matter. The most important thing for me, legally and constitutionally, and basing on the interest of Syrian people and the principle of any state, that you're not allowed as a citizen to hold machine guns and hurt people or properties. This is the only thing that we ask. We don't ask for anything. As I said, we give them full amnesty, and that happened, and they joined the Syrian army, and some of them joined the political process.
So there is real amnesty you're offering to all the rebels?
And it worked. We did it and it worked.
why the Syrian government cannot accept that there are two kinds of groups. One is the terrorist side, ISIS and al-Nusra, and on the other side, the rebels, let's say more civilian. Why is it always that you say we are just fighting terrorists?
Whoever hold armaments against civilians or against private or public property legally is a terrorist. I think the same in my country and the same in your country. You don't accept something called rebels in your country. You don't accept something called moderate opposition, while you have opposition, to hold the armaments in order to reach its goal. So it's not accepted in any country. So this is one aspect of your question. The other aspect, we don't say every militant is extremist. We said the majority now who took control of the field, let's say, is only those extremist groups. The other party that's being promoted as moderate is irrelevant, is trivial. It doesn't have any influence on the ground. That's why most of his grassroots has to join the extremists, not because they are extremists, either out of fear or for the money, for the salary. So that's when we say that what we are fighting are the extremist group, because the real, let's say, enemy now, which is terrorism, made of those terrorist groups, mainly Daesh and al-Nusra and Ahrar al-Sham and Jaish al-Islam, mainly.
Don't you feel that there is in fact still a difference? These terrorists, how you saw, they are from abroad. They're coming from Saudi Arabia, from Chechnya, wherever in the world, while the rebels are at least Syrian. And at any point of the discussion, you have to talk to them. Why you cannot start today?
We did. We already did, and that's what I talked about. That's what I mentioned as reconciliations. Reconciliation, we have to talk to the militants.
Yes.
You don't talk to political opposition. Talk to the people who are fighting on the ground. That's what we did, and I agree with that point. But when you talk about two different kind of, what you call them, rebels, Syrians and others, actually they work together. You don't have a group of foreigners in Syria. You have foreigners mixing with the Syrians in the same groups, and they share the same ideology, the same hopes of having what they call Islamic State or something similar, or the same ideology that doesn't accept any other one that doesn't look like them.
Mr. President, you accepted a transitional process. What are the next steps?
Actually, the process is to have a national unity government where whoever wants to come and join our government to be part of it. This government should prepare for the next constitution. After the constitution, you should have parliamentary elections that's going to define the shape of the next country, next Syria or the new Syria. So these are the main steps of the transitional period.
I was here in 2012 when the first elections were held, parliamentary elections 4 years ago. Yeah. How can you say it's possible to hold elections during a civil war?
Yeah. First of all, there's no civil war, because the definition is wrong. Civil war when you have certain lines, social lines, based, let's say, on sects or ethnicities or any similar line. So we don't have those lines now, because where the government control, the area that's been controlled by the government, are mixed. You can find in it every color of the Syrian social spectrum. So you cannot talk about civil war as a definition. Actually, the terrorists versus the rest. Second, for the election, it's not the hobby, first of all. It's not the point of view of the president or the mood of the government. It doesn't reflect all of that. It reflects the constitution. Our war is about the independence of our country, because they want to depose the government and the president, other countries, mainly the Western and Saudi and Qatar. It's about destroying the state, and it's about making Syria a sectarian country, like Lebanon and maybe like Iraq. The constitution today is the symbol of the unity, the symbol of the sovereignty, and the symbol of independent country. We have to be adhered to the constitution. The constitution is not what's written on the paper, it's how you practice it. One of them is the election, and this is not the right of the government, this is the right of every Syrian citizen. They have to decide whether they want it or not. If you ask any Syrian, everybody wants to have a new parliament.
Is the constitution, is stability more important than hundreds of thousands of lives?
No, there's no contradiction to put them, which is more important, because if you don't have stability, you will have thousands of lives gone. If you have stability, you will save lives. So you cannot say it's more important than, it's important for. Stability in constitutions are very important to save lives. That's how we look at it.
The overwhelming majority of countries, organizations in the world say that there might be no solution for the Syrian question with you in power. Are you willing to step back?
For those countries and those officials, no, of course not, because it's not their business. That's why we never responded. It's been 5 years since they said that, and we never give a damn to what they say. It's only our business. It's a Syrian business. Only the Syrian citizen had the right to say whoever wants to be the president or not. As a German, you don't accept me or any other one to tell you who's going to be your chancellor and what the social political system. You don't accept it, and we don't accept it. So no, regardless of whatever they say, my political fate only linked to the will of the Syrian people.
But in general, if the conditions are that the Syrian people want you to step back, would you be willing?
Of course, definitely. When the Syrian people want me to leave that position, I have to do it right away, without any hesitation. Because if you want to succeed as official, as president, or as elected prime minister, whatever, you need the support of the public. Without that support, you cannot achieve anything. So what would you do in your position? So they are linked together, their will with your ability to achieve something or to succeed.
Is there any imagination already about the time of this step? There are a lot of dates mentioned. One is from the surrounding of de Mistura's office. They say the most probable time would be 2018. Is that
no, it's not their business. It's not part of any plan. As I said, this is only Syrian. We can only discuss it as Syrians.
Would you agree that what we see in Syria is a humanitarian disaster?
Of course, definitely.
Why it then took so long that you granted full access to the besieged areas in Syria?
Actually, no, that's not true. We didn't take a long time to give that access. Actually, the Western media took a long time to recognize what's going on the ground. And I'm being very frank with you. Let's ask very logical and realistic question at the same time. What they called besieged area has been surrounded by the army for years now. And those areas still fighting the army and shelling mortars on the army and on neighboring cities and so on. The question, how could we prevent them from having food while we cannot prevent them from having armament? Is it logical? It doesn't work. We either make full embargo or we cannot make embargo. So we don't make embargo for many reasons, not only for the humanitarian aspects and for the values that we believe in and for our role as a government to be responsible of every Syrian, but actually because if you do that, you will send those civilians into the lap of the terrorists. That's going to play directly into the hands of the terrorists. This is one example. The other practical example, how could we make embargo on such cities that you've mentioned and maybe other cities that's been mentioned recently, and at the same time we are still sending salaries to Al-Raqqa, which is under the control of ISIS, and we're still sending vaccines. How can we make embargo here and not making embargo there? This is contradiction. This is show that it's not realistic, what you've mentioned.
Could you now, after the ceasefire, guarantee that there is a permanent access for relief organizations for these besieged areas, like continuously?
They've been working here for the last few years now. We never said no, but their work should be through the government. They cannot work as there's no government. So we never said no. No, of course, you always have, let's say, the reality on the ground that maybe put obstacles where you have fighting. Sometimes you have conflicts between the officials in the government and in those organizations. But as a political decision, we don't have any problem with those, let's say, aid to reach anywhere in Syria, and we support that.